Okay, good morning, everyone. So we'll start with the Dvar Torah. I'll just tell you what I just heard this morning. Besides the Dvar Torah and the Parsha, which is a very cute and very new idea to me, that I just heard this morning from Rav Hanoch Goldberg, the one who gives the Dvar Torah after davening. He quoted the Taz, who says something very, very cute, very amazing. What is the reason we pour over wine when we pour wine for Havdalah? We pour it over the becher, over the cup, so it spills over. So normally we know, we're more familiar with the idea that we want plentifulness for the week. We should have Shavua blessings for the upcoming week. So we pour it over to show that we'd like shefa, we'd like an abundance of good, of blessings. That's a normal idea. It's based on the Gemara that says, "Kol bayit shelo nishpach bo yain kamayim eina bracha shorabo." In any home that the wine doesn't spill over like water, there's no bracha, no blessing in that house. So the normal way of understanding it is that there's so much plentifulness that wine is regarded like water, and that's a house where where Hashem will bless with good fortune. So the Taz explains it in a different way, and it's a very nice, amazing way to understand this idea. He says, normally when someone spills over wine or anything in the house or breaks something, then then the other people in the house, the residents of the house, may get angry. Why do you do that? Why do you spill? Why do you break? It makes the person angry. So says the Taz, we want to show that we're controlled, that even though wine spills over the cup and it goes to waste, we don't get angry. We hold it in, and we understand that things can happen, things can spill over. So it teaches us how to behave for the rest of the week. That's a Shavua Tov. We want a good week. We should be controlled and not get angry, not get mad at people who spill over or break things in the house. So it's a very nice idea. And then he says the meaning of Chazal, Kol bayit shelo nishpach bo yain kamayim en siman bracha, meaning that if a person doesn't regard spilling over of wine as if it was just water, and instead of that, he gets mad, because over water, you don't get angry. No one gets angry if water spills over by mistake by someone. That doesn't bother really anyone to the point where they get mad. So if a person in a house that wine isn't regarded like water when it spills over, but you don't get mad, then that house doesn't have a siman bracha. That house is a house of anger. And anger, we know, doesn't lead to any bracha, anything good. So I think it's a very nice idea of the Taz. Definitely will take it in two hands and try to live up to it. That these things don't aggravate us, don't get us mad, because then we just lose a lot by acting that way. Okay. Now a few words about the Parsha. So we read Parshas Beshalach yesterday, speaking about the splitting of the sea mainly, and Am Yisrael going through and the Egyptians drowning, and then we have the Shira Sayam, and at the end of the Parsha we have the whole issue of the man, of receiving the manna from heaven and being fed by Hashem all through the 40 years of the Midbar, of the desert. So by the man, we read the Torah tells us, why was it called man? Because of manhu, meaning the Jews didn't know what this is, mahu, like what is this? And since they called it that way, since they expressed that question when they saw these flakes falling down from heaven and landing on the ground, and then for them to eat it, they didn't know what it was, so they called it man. So this connects the Fasemes discusses this point that a person should always be open to new understandings, to new ways. Have a question mark regarding other people's opinions. Don't be stubborn about what you believe in, about what you think should be right or is the right thing. No, you have to be open to always ask questions. Always be interested in phenomena that happen, in other people's opinions, in yourself, always acquiring more and more levels of spirituality, of worshiping Hashem. Always strive forward to gain more and more levels of Yirat Shamayim, of Torah, of mitzvos, of chasadim, of good deeds. You never put a period in the end and say, that's it. I'm complete. I know what I know. I do what I do, and that's enough for me. Always try to strive for more and more, to elevate yourself more and more. And this connects to the point that Moshe Rabbeinu in yesterday's parsha says when he's challenged by the Jewish people, they're complaining that they have no water, they're thirsty. Why did you take us out of Egypt? We'll all die here in the desert. So Moshe Rabbeinu reacts together with Aaron, V'nachnu ma kitalinu aleinu. Who are we that you're complaining to us? It's all directly complaints to Hashem. We're nothing. Nachnu ma. We're only his messengers. So this is where the Gemara. So first of all, we see here also that Moshe Rabbeinu defined himself and Aaron as ma. Now he meant we're nothing. Nachnu ma. Who are we? Why are you turning to us? Why should we be in charge of anything? So that's from a very humble point of view, because he was definitely the leader of the Jewish people. Not that he could have done much to satiate them and provide water, but still to say about himself and about Aaron that we're nothing. Who are we? That's very humble. The Gemara says that there were three humble people in the Jewish history: Avram, Moshe, and David. Avram said about himself, Anochi afar va'efer. He's like dust and dirt. Moshe and Aaron said, Benachnu ma kitalinu aleinu. This is the pasuk from yesterday's parsha that the Gemara quotes of him being so humble. And Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech saying about himself, Anochi tolaat velo ish. I'm like a worm, not a human being even. And the Gemara says that Moshe was on top of all because Avram and David at least said they were something, even if it's dust and earth, or David HaMelech saying that he's like a worm, it's still something. And Moshe is saying, we're nothing. But beyond being so humble by the words V'nachnu ma, it also expresses the fact that he's always willing to learn. V'nachnu ma. What else is there to learn? We're always asking a question. We're always having a question mark to understand the situation. Here too, he was telling the Jewish people, always be open to what the next stage in life will be, to how Hashem will provide for you. Don't be a person who complains is a person that's displeased with what he has. Instead of being pleased and open to more and more and to receive from Hashem and to perfect themselves more and more, instead of that, they're complaining. They're saying we're not getting what we have, what we need. This isn't worth anything. They're closed. They're feeling whatever they've got. If it's not enough, then let's complain. Instead of trying to understand what Hashem wants of them in this situation and trying to believe in Hashem that things will be coming to them and they'll progress as they go along. Instead of that, they're closed. They're not looking forward. They're looking backwards. Bring us back to Egypt. It was much better in Egypt. That's not the idea of ma. Ma is always a question mark. Be open to what will develop onward as we go onwards. And this is the way the Maharal explains the difference between human beings and animals. In Hebrew, the word for animal is behemah. One of the words for animals is behemot. Behemah, says the Maharal, ba-ma. Meaning, whatever she's got, it's got in it, that's what it's got. Ba in it is ma, is what is in it. Because an animal never progresses in life. It never learns more. It never reaches higher levels. An animal is set, programmed from day one till it dies to be the exact same creature. It may be a little bit better in hunting or a little bit better, quicker in running, but it's not something very essential, very important of a development that it goes through its life. A cat or a dog are from day one till they die, the same cat and the same dog. Nothing changes. Their instincts are a little bit sharper, maybe, drop better than the way they were born when they experience life. But not much changes, nothing fundamental, nothing serious changes in their personality. There's no personality in an animal almost. So it's not something that develops. Ba-ma. Whereas a man, Adam, the word Adam, which refers to human beings, is the gematria of ma. 45. Very simple. Mem is 40. Daled Aleph is 5. 4 and 1. So a man, a human being, is a ma. Is someone that's always asking the question, where am I meant to, how can I develop more? How can I exercise more of my talents in this world to do better? How can I grow? Ma, what's the next stage? What should I be doing the next stage? What should I be progressing in? How should I progress? So that's the idea of ma. And when a person is born, we have no idea how he's going to end up to be. It's not something that's the same from day one till the end of life. Every person develops in a good way or chas v'chela, a bad way, but there's always a development. There's always something that comes out of the person that we have no idea what it will be when the person is born. You see a tiny baby of 1 or 2 or 3 years old, 3 days old, you have no idea what it's going to develop to become. It's always a question mark, ma, what's going to be of him? So that's the proper way to live our lives. And I just thought one last point of this pasuk, v'nachnu ma, I just thought of another idea that it says v'nachnu ma. It doesn't say anachnu. Why would Moshe Rabbeinu omit the letter aleph from the word? The proper, seemingly proper way of saying it is anachnu ma. Why does it say v'nachnu ma? So I thought maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to Am Yisrael, was telling Am Yisrael, we, nachnu ma, we're nothing. Again, the interpretation we said before is also that he meant they were always developing, we're always prepared to listen and to learn more by what happens in reality and by what we learn from the books. We're always prepared to become, to climb higher and higher levels. But it's also the meaning of who are we? We're nothing. But we're nothing if it's only us. If Hashem is with us, the Aleph leads to Hashem, Alufo Shel Olam, the one and only, the number one, the leader, the Lord of the world. So if Hashem is with us, then we're worth a lot. Nachnu, without Hashem, If it's just ourselves, we're nothing. If Hashem dwells with amongst us, within us, and we're prepared to receive His holiness, His divine presence in us, then we're worth a lot. Then as messengers of Hashem, we have a lot to give, a lot to teach and lead and bring people to a better place. That's when it's anachnu, with Hashem. But without Hashem, nachnu we're nothing. So lead your complaints to Hashem. We, as individuals, who are you complaining to? Who are we to complain to us when we're not at all in charge of anything? It's all Hashem. The moment you understand it's anachnu, that Hashem is with us and Hashem leads the way, nothing to complain about. You can pray to Him, you can ask Him for blessings, that's fine. But to complain, there's no place to complain. Hashem knows exactly what He's doing. He knows exactly what's good for us at this moment. And He knows that He's sending us a message by not providing the water. He was sending the Jewish people a message that they should know they're all dependent on Hashem, completely dependent on Hashem. They should pray to Him, and they should do good deeds in order for Him to supply their needs. So that's the idea that comes from the Parshas Haman. And very last point, which is also very, very beautiful, great message, similar to the Taz that we quoted in the beginning of not getting angry if someone spills over something or breaks something in the house. Stay calm. Same as in Havdalah, we pour it over to say that we're not upset if wine gets poured, if wine spills over. So similar idea, my wife told me, in the name of a woman called Rachel Bulton. I think she's connected to Chabad movement. She gives shiurim to women about personality traits and fixing our ways as morally and with values and so on and so forth. She used to be a businesswoman, and then she gave it all up in order to study, and then she became more like a teacher, an educator. So she said a very nice idea that v'nachnu ma, Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Am Yisrael how to react to a situation where when someone speaks nasty towards you, embarrasses you in public, very difficult situation. How should we react? Says Moshe Rabbeinu, v'nachnu ma. You should just say, azma. Who cares? You said it. It slipped away. I don't take it to heart. That's the v'nachnu ma. This is say, azma. So what? If this and this happened against me, hurt my feelings, made me mad, azma. That's that person's tough luck that he's behaving that way. It shouldn't hurt us, shouldn't pain us too much, and we should respond angrily and hurt him and take revenge and speak nasty back to him. That's going to create a whole difficult situation of machlokes, of dispute, of argument, and it won't end well. Whereas if we just let it slip away, v'nachnu ma, so what? If they said that about me, I know the truth. Hashem is with me. I'm striving to be a good person. I don't take it to heart. If someone hurts my feelings, that's the right way to respond to such situations. Not easy, but we have to try our best, especially between husbands and wives. Many times one side is hurt by the other, but if they react in a way that they hurt the other person back, hurt their feelings back, and start an argument and start fighting, definitely won't lead to a good place. If you stay calm, you absorb what happened, you can then speak about it in a calm way a day or two afterwards and explain to your spouse, you said this and this, it hurt my feelings. Also use the I message, it hurt my feelings. Don't say, you hurt my feelings. Don't blame. Rather, speak about what you felt. Speak about yourself. Don't blame the other. And then the person will definitely feel bad that they hurt your feelings, and they'll regret what they did. They'll ask forgiveness, and they'll never do it again, and so on and so forth. If you start pointing a finger to your spouse, saying, "Why did you do this to me?" or "You did something so bad to me," or "So you were so mean, you were so negative, you were so bad," so the person doesn't take it well, and then the whole fight starts between the husband and wife. So it has to be when you're calm and able to verbalize your feelings and not blame the other for doing something towards you. Okay, so that's Dvar Torah. Okay, we'll continue with our halachos. Yes, David. Yes.
I found this interesting about a year or two ago in this year that I learned this and I wasn't doing it right. And then I used it for Shabbat as a halacha. So maybe in a sentence I'm sure everyone else does it correctly and I don't, but we learned from the man how we're supposed to do the bracha on the Lechem Mishnah correctly.
Correct.
Because I learned from the shiur to keep the cover on.
Right. Right.
I'm throwing it out only because I didn't know it until I was over 50. So I thought maybe just saying a sentence or two because it's based on a parsha. That's it. I'm not saying you should say it.
Okay. Yeah, that's very true. The Shmir Shabbos Kil Chasa says that we learned from the man, it came down, Tam Yisrael, it came down on a layer of dew and then a layer on top of it of dew. It was wrapped like a gift, like a present to Tam Yisrael. The man was wrapped from both sides with dew. So Chazal learned that because in the Parsha it says, Velaketu lechem mishneh, that they will receive double the amount on Friday in order to have enough food for Shabbos. So we learn from this lechem mishneh. That's where we take the idea of two breads to cut the challah, as we say, a motzi, say it over two loaves of bread, or two chalot. So besides that, and by the way, we also learned shalosh suudot from this week's parsha, from yesterday's parsha. It says, ichnu hayom, natan lachem man hayom, ichnu hayom, hayom timtzeu basadeh. 3 times in one pasuk, it says the word hayom. You will receive the man, eat it today. You will see the man today, eat it today, and you won't find any of it in the field today. So the 3 times that it says hayom in one pasuk, Chazal derived from that shalosh suudot. That's what we take. That's the hint in the Torah to have 3 meals on Shabbat: Friday night, Shabbos day, and Shabbos afternoon. So a lot of halachos of the way we eat our meals for Shabbat are taken from the man. So what David just mentioned is that that's one of the reasons we cover the chalot before we say amotzi. We cover them because it comes to resemble the dew that was on top, and underneath we have the challah board or the tablecloth. We have underneath the challah some layer as well. So it's a double layer, top and bottom, to show to place it the way the man was placed between the 2 layers of dew. Now, this takes us to the understanding and to the halacha that one should keep the cover over the chalot all the way through Birkas Hamotzi, not just while they're saying Kiddush, which, by the way, has another meaning to it, that we don't want to embarrass the chalot when we're saying kiddush first. Because normally a motzi comes before ber pri hagafen. In this case, because kiddush has to be said first in order to allow us to eat, so we have to start with ber pri hagafen. So in order for the chalot not to be embarrassed that we're shoving them aside and taking the wine first, so we cover them, not to shame them. So from that point of view, it would have been enough to cover them up to the point of finishing Kiddush. The moment you finish Kiddush, you could have exposed them. And definitely before Hamotzi, when you sit down after Netilas Yadayim and you're prepared to say Hamotzi, then definitely you should be able to take it away, the cover, and say Hamotzi. But since this other understanding of the man is that the man was covered from both sides, and that's why we do the covering over and place it on something in the bottom. So it's better if we keep it packaged and covered all the way through Birkas Hamotzi. While we're saying Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, they still should be covered. Only when we finish Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, then we throw off the cover and we start cutting the bread, the challah. Because that's how it was for Am Yisrael, that it was covered until the moment they ate it. So the blessing should still have it covered due to the fact that the man was covered all the way through, assuming they said a bracha as well. While they were saying the bracha, it was still covered, and then they grabbed the man and they ate it. So that's true, that's what the Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa tells us to do. It just reminded me as I was saying this of another point. What was I thinking as I was saying this? Not to embarrass, have it covered. I don't remember right now. Okay, we'll see if it comes back to me later. But that's true. By the way, this is the reason, since it's also the idea of the packaged man that we express by covering the challah, this is the reason that even by Sudah Shlishit, you should have a covering over your challah, a challah cover. Even though Sudah Shlishit doesn't require kiddush, there's no kiddush then. So by the idea of embarrassing doesn't apply to Sudah Shlishit, but the idea of the man does. So even Sudah Shlishit, you should have it covered all the way through Birkas Hamotzi and then uncover it. Of course, these are fine details that we should follow as much as we can, but of course, Yotze, any of this stuff, if you don't do it the proper way, even if you take off the covering before Motzi, or even if you don't cover it at all, these are all small points within the mitzvah of Lechem Mishnah. But it's definitely better to go all the way, do it all the way properly. Okay, so for this chapter, a new chapter is starting now, chapter 45 in the book. We're mamash the very, very end of the book of the first volume of Alichot Shabbat. I would say this should take us, this chapter and the next should be finishing, we should be able to finish today or maximum another week. We're able to finish the book, which is a nice, beautiful achievement of Hilchos Shabbos of Alichot Shabbat. Then I think the best would be, since we've done Hilchos Brachos very thoroughly in the past, 6 years or so going through Mizos Bracha, so I think we can continue Hilchos Shabbos with the second volume of Ophir Malka's books of Alichot Shabbat. It will take us again to review each book includes, of course, different halachos. Will take us to review over again Hilchos Shabbos from another angle, from other examples or other halachos that we brought that will be discussed in the second volume. I think that should be the next book we should go. Even though he does have a book related to Hilchos Brachos as well, Alichot Brachot. But since we've done it quite thoroughly with the Zot Bracha, we did it from almost cover to cover. So I think we should continue on Hilchos Shabbos, and when we finish the second volume, Then we can go back to the Brachos and review that over again with Pilaka's book instead of Zos Bracha, to give us a different angle of those Brachos. It's always all our life. We're always reviewing what to do, so we get it all straight. Okay. So the next chapter is Hafsharat Be'asiyat Kerach. After we finish the chapter of timers, we've done most of the issues about timers on Shabbat. That was a totally random discussion here. If one is allowed to melt ice or freeze water into ice. Can you make ice or can you melt ice on Shabbat? So firstly, before we go into the actual discussions in the book, the examples of the book, we'll explain what could be the issue of melting ice and what could be the issue of making ice on Shabbat. So melting ice is a Mefarish Gemara. There's an explicit Gemara on this. Shabbos Nun Aleph Amud Bet, 51b in Masechet Shabbos. It tells us that one mustn't crush ice to make water out of it and drink the water. En meraskin kerach sheleg barad b'Shabbat. You can't crush ice, snow, or hail on Shabbat to make water to drink. Why not? What's the issue of what type of malacha you're involved in? Of course, it's not a doraita malacha, it's only rabbinic. But what type of rabbinic prohibition are you involved in when you crush ice and make it into water? What could be, why is that a violation of Shabbat? So there are three different explanations in the Rishonim what the issue may be. Rashi on the spot, Shabbat Alphabet says, something very interesting, Rashi. He says, Domeh lemelacha shebore ma'im ha'il. Says Rashi that crushing ice and making it into water is like a melacha, domeh lemelacha, it's like a creation, because bore ma'im ha'il, because you're creating water. There was no water before, and by crushing the ice, you created water. So what melacha is Rashi referring to? Domeh lemelacha is a melacha. What is it similar to? Which melacha is it similar to? So you could say that it's like bone or soter, it's like building or like destroying, which are melachos on Shabbat. But it doesn't seem so. A, Rashi doesn't say that. And B, what type of building is there here? You haven't built out of bricks or connecting things one to another to build some structure of some type. You just made the ice into water. What type of building is this? And even destroying is not true here. The ice is meant to become water. Not destroying something that was positive and making it negative. Here it's making it what it should be, creating what should be out of it. So what type of malacha are we talking about? So the understanding of in Rashi is, that's how all the Achronim explain, that it means, domeh lemelacha means a general concept of melacha, not any specific melacha. The general concept of we're supposed to refrain from creating things on Shabbat. The whole idea of Shabbat is not to create. Now, true that there are specifics, meleches bonem, meleches soter, meleches mebashel, meleches borer, 39 specific melachos that we should not be doing. But that's all on the Doraita level. That from the Torah, we're not meant to create all kinds of things that the Torah numerates, or Chazal numerate in the name of the Torah, of the 39 melachos. Here says Rashi, it's just connected to the general aspect of melacha that we should not be creating something on Shabbat. Shebore ma'im eilu. You're creating this water now. So it's not connected to, it's not hooked on to any specific melacha. It's just Chazal. It's almost like the understanding, now that I think of it, it's almost like the understanding of Ziluta de Shabta, which we said is a general concept in Chazal, that we should not desecrate the spirit of Shabbat. It goes against the spirit of Shabbat. On Shabbat, you're supposed to rest. Now, resting doesn't mean the opposite of working hard. That's a very famous misconception of Shabbat. Many times the Chilonim. I was also asked recently by a person who unfortunately is a datla. He used to be religious and he left everything. He's completely not religious today. Not completely, because he still wears a kippah, but it's quite fake, meaning inside he doesn't believe in anything and he doesn't do any of the mitzvahs. He's still wearing a kippah because that's what he was traditionally used to during all of his lifetime, so he kept it on. But he asked me recently, he says, how can something like striking a match or lighting a lighter, matzit, on Shabbat, flicking on a lighter, how can that be a melach? How can that be problematic on Shabbat? There's no effort whatsoever. You're not putting any effort into it. Just press a button and boom, you have a fire. What type of melach can this be? Once upon a time, to do havara, to create a flame, you needed to rub stones one against the other and work hard until you got the flame, until you got the fire out of them. Today, it's like this. It's in a second you get the flame. So why is that a problem? The answer is, of course, famous answer of Samson Raphael Hirsch. Explains this very, very beautifully, mainly based on him, but it's probably more ancient than that. That was discussed in this way. That malacha has nothing to do with working hard. It has nothing to do with the effort you put into it. It's the yetzirah. Yetzirah is to create something. You brought something new to the world. That's not meant to be done on Shabbat. Shabbat, we're a total rest. Not rest from the point of view of exertion. Rest from the point of view of just benefiting from the world, enjoying, oneg Shabbos, enjoy the world. Don't create more and more now. Don't develop it. Enjoy what you have, and then go on to developing the rest of the week. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Those are days of Yemei Ma'aseh. Yemei Ma'aseh is days of doings. When you're developing things, when you're creating things, that's good for weekdays. On Shabbat, you just enjoy what you've got. Or as the Kuzari explained very nicely, that Shabbat is the day of balancing oneself. During the week, we're always running, doing things in all kinds of directions. But on Shabbat, we're sitting down and assessing where we are, what we're meant to, where should we be going? In which direction? Are we in the right direction? Assessing that is on Shabbat, where you don't continue running. Then on Shabbat, you're checking yourself. You're inspecting yourself. To inspect oneself is on Shabbat, where you check, are you in the right direction? Mainly spiritually. Are you connecting to Hashem more and more, or are you going away from Hashem? Has v'chalila. And on Shabbat, by connecting to Hashem very strongly, that gives you the direction of the continuing days of the week to go in the right path. That's Shabbat. Yom HaIzun, says the Kuzari. The day of balancing, the day of assessing yourself and seeing where you're going, in what direction are you going. Are you heading to become a better and better Jew, a more fulfilled Jew, a more holy, pure Jew, or are you in the wrong direction? That's what Shabbat is supposed to tell us by inspecting, by checking, by enjoying the spiritual feelings on Shabbat and seeing if we're actually developing in the right direction and feeling the spirituality or not. So, so again, back to Rashi. All this is a little bit of a tangent from Rashi's point. Rashi says that by crushing ice and making it water, you've created something. And on Shabbat, you're not supposed to create. Yes, so we said it doesn't matter how difficult you work to do it. Even if it's a second, you crush the ice for a second, you make water out of it, doesn't matter. It's the fact that you've created something new that's problematic. Of course, rabbinic. No such melacha and the lametet, the most malacha, don't create. Doesn't say that. It gives you all the different details of what is considered creating. But the mere fact of don't create doesn't appear in one of the 39 malachas. It's only rabbinically forbidden. So that's Rashi's position of how come you're not allowed to crush ice and make it into water. Another opinion is of the Rambam, who says that it's based on mashkin shezavu, meaning there's a term that says that if a fruit or vegetable is so ripe, it's so soft, that its juice starts coming out of it on its own. You didn't squeeze the orange, you didn't squeeze the clementine. They're just so soft, maybe even on the virtue of spoiling. And the juice starts coming out, it starts flowing out of them. That you mustn't drink that juice on Shabbat. Rabbinically forbidden. That's called mashkin shezavu. How come? It's actually mainly related to zeitim v'anavim, grapes and olives, because that's where the prohibition is, the right of prohibition not to squeeze them in order to make juice out of them. So by them mainly, if it comes out on itself, by itself, you mustn't drink it. How come? Hence, you may squeeze them directly with inaction. If you squeeze them on Shabbat, that's an issur of dash, of sochit. You mustn't squeeze certain fruits at the deraita level, certain rabbinic, certain are completely allowed. But you mustn't squeeze fruits to make juice, because that's dash. That's the malach of dash. So Chazal came up with this gzeira, with this decree that you mustn't drink the juice that came out even on its own without you squeezing it, because if you enjoy that, if you benefit from that, you may by mistake squeeze it out as well. In order for you not to go ahead and squeeze something, you have to make sure that you have to stay away, refrain from even something that came out on its own. Says the Rambam, that's the idea of en meraskin sheleg. You're not allowed to squeeze to crush ice or snow, because you're creating water, you're getting out the juice, so to speaking, the liquid out of it. And if you do that, you may squeeze a grape or an olive for its liquids, for their juice. So it's a gzeira atu mashkin shezavu, that we hold a decree. Hence, you may squeeze in with your own hands directly those fruits that we mustn't squeeze to begin with. It's dash. So that's the reasoning why we can't crush ice, according to the Rambam. The third reason appears in the Sefer Truma. Sefer Truma says because this is called molid. Molid is again a rabbinic expression that actually similar to creating. The Rashi said not to create, but molid is in general rabbinic concept that we mustn't like give birth to something new, molid. But so what happens is, if that happens, it's muhtzeh, because it's called nolad. The moment something gets created, it gets sort of born on Shabbat, it's nolad, and it's a muhtzeh object. You can't touch it. So you definitely can't drink it on Shabbat. So those are the three different ideas of the Rishonim. How come you mustn't crush ice to make water out of it? as we go along the chapter, we'll see nafkaminot. We'll see different ways to derive halacha within various types of situations that vary between the Rambam and Rashi and the Balat and Sefer Truma. As we go along, we'll see differences. I'll just mention before we continue into the specific situations in the book, I'll just mention another very important fundamental issue that comes out of all this. This is the main nafkamina. This is the main difference between these opinions that we just mentioned now of the Rishonim, why you mustn't crush ice. The Shulchan Aruch, Progressive Kara, the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch, he follows the Rambam on the reasoning as to what the reasoning of crushing ice, the prohibition of crushing ice and making it into water, he's following the Rambam, which is a decree that you mustn't do so because then you may go and squeeze olives and grapes and make wine or oil or wine out of them, and that's not allowed d'oraita level. So if you go according to the Rambam, what would happen if you just allow it to melt? You take an empty cup, you put some ice cubes in it, and you just leave it out on the counter and let it melt. Would that be a problem of making ice into water? So, although we spoke about the fact that by fruits themselves, we mustn't enjoy and benefit from even juice that came out of them alone without you squeezing it, like it's a very ripe fruit that its juice is just coming out of it, gushing out of it. That's true for actual fruits, because that's closer. There, the decree of Chazal was that if we enjoy that, if we benefit that, we may go squeeze the fruits, which is not allowed. But ice is so far removed from a fruit, it's not really squeezing the ice and getting the water out of it. It's crushing it or melting it. That is the issue. So, 1 second, please. Someone's calling out. 1 second. Oh, yeah, that's correct. Okay, yeah. So according to Shulchan Aruch, it would not be a problem. Here it says in Shin Kaf, Seif Tet, 320, letter 9, the Shulchan Aruch says only crushing is an issue. Because if you're crushing ice, that's similar, that makes it more similar to squeezing a fruit to get its juice out. So that's not allowed because it's a gzera decree that you may go do so by fruit. But to let the ice melt even into an empty cup of water would not be a problem because that's so far removed from actually squeezing a fruit. So according to Shulchan Aruch, according to the Sfardim actually, Sfardim who follow Shulchan Aruch, they are allowed to even place ice cubes into an empty cup and let it melt into water. It's not considered a rabbinic prohibition. Whereas according to Ashkenazim, the Ramah follows the Sefer Truma, that it's a problem of nolad, molid and nolad, meaning by crushing you're creating something that's more similar to Rashi, but also the mere fact that it came out on its own because it melted into an empty cup, that itself is nolad. It was born on Shabbat, so to speak. And that's muktzah. So, according to the Ramah, you mustn't benefit from melted ice when it was melted into an empty cup. You're not allowed to benefit from it. So you can't do that. You can't allow it to melt. You're creating a muktzah on Shabbat. You definitely can't move it or anything. On the other hand, opposite direction of an afkamina that comes out, where in this case, the Sephardim were more lenient, as in most cases, and the Ashkenazi more stringent, to allow it to melt into an empty cup. We just said the Sephardim would allow, and the Ashkenazim not. But in the other direction, there's a leniency for the Ashkenazim and a stringency for the Sephardim. And that is, if we actually crush ice, we're crushing the ice into water, into existing water. We have a cup of water, and I want to crush the ice into it. Or let's begin this way. Let's begin by just placing ice cubes into water on Shabbat. That's allowed according to all opinions. How come? For Sephardim, you're not crushing the ice, it just melts. So it's not similar enough to squeezing fruits, so you're not afraid that you may go squeeze fruits. On the other hand, according to Ashkenazim, it's okay because there's no nolad. Why is there no nolad? You can't see the ice that formulates into water because it goes straight into the existing water in the cup. So it's not visible that something was born on Shabbat, so it's not nolad. Nolad is only when you see the actual substance being created on Shabbat. You see what was created on Shabbat, that's nolad. But if it got integrated into the water, it got mixed with the water that was already there, you can't see anything that was created on Shabbat, so it's okay. There's no problem, nolad. So that's okay according to either Sephardim or Ashkenazim, it wouldn't matter. Both Ashkenazim and Sephardim would allow that.
Rabbi, I don't want to. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't use ice cubes on Shabbos, but I mean, at least you got to be consistent. And in my very humble opinion, if your glass of water has 6 ounces, and after the ice cubes melt, it has 10 ounces now. Obviously, you see that there's a difference. How could you say there's no difference? The volume has changed. You had a half a cup of water. Now you have a full cup of water. Abracadabra, magic. I'm just saying halakhically. The halakha is not being, in my very humble opinion. I mean, the Rav doesn't see my point.
Yeah, I see your point. It's a good point. Normally, when I picture ice cubes that are thrown into a cup of water, I picture it more as a close to full cup of water and 2-3 ice cubes that you throw in. There, it's hard to tell the difference. The volume doesn't change to such an extent that you can see the difference. You're right about a case where you have half a cup of water and you throw in 10 or 15 ice cubes into it, then you really see the growth in quantity of the water in the cup. Then you're right. It's a good question. The only way I'm thinking now to answer, yes, David, you have an idea? David Barth. Yes. David? David Barth? Hello, David? No, he's stuck.
I have an idea, but I don't know if Shmi Ayin and not exactly Yeshmei. You don't hear me.
No, I can hear you now, yes. I can hear you. Yeah, go.
Oh, I was just offering the difference between Yeshmei Ayin and not exactly Yeshmei Ayin. That when there's some water, even if the ice cubes are more, it's not exactly Yeshmei Ayin. When you have just cubes and no water, I'm just throwing that out. I don't know if there's a halakha for that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Just for that.
Yeah, it depends if we go literally to that concept of, or we're discussing what's visible. That's the difference between the two Davids here. David Levine was saying what's visible to us, and it is visible because we see a difference in volume. Quantity is much greater now. So that's considered Nolan. David Barth is saying, but after all, there was water beforehand, so it's not completely new It's not completely its own entity. No matter what, it's mixed in the original water. I would add another point to what Dei Bar just said now. I would add one more point, that we have what's called kama bati. It's a concept, a halacha concept, that says every amount, every small amount, every drop that you pour into an existing liquid gets nullified to the liquid. That's called kama batil. Drop by drop is batil, it gets nullified to what's inside. It has to do with Isur v'heter concepts, issues that come up, nullifying the maybe what's the discussion there?
No?
I think it's by but no, but it doesn't work directly by basa b'chalav itself. Meaning you can't say that if a drop of water lands on a piece of meat, so it gets nullified, and then another drop gets nullified, and then we never have times 6. We always have times 60 of the milk, even though you've poured in the end much more milk than 60. 60. 1 second again. I need to answer someone. It could be even that in that situation that we would say that. Speaker? It could be in that situation we would say that, but I think more what comes out to mind now is when you have a mikveh that has the proper type of water in it that became rainwater, accumulated, and now mayim shuvim are added to it. So every drop of mayim shuvim, the water that comes from a faucet, any drop that falls in gets nullified to the mikveh. We don't mind, even if in the end there's a majority of mayim shuvim, you don't pour it all at once, then it's problematic. But if you pour drop by drop, then it's a kosher mikveh. Anyhow, there's this concept of kama batil. So here I would say that the idea of the ice is, since every drop of water that gets mixed in with the existing water from the ice that's being melted, so even though in the end you see the quantity much higher than it was before, the volume is greater than it was before, but every drop of the ice got nullified to the existing water, and then that itself became as if it was a nolad, and the next drop is again nullified to the existing water, and so on and so forth. You get the whole thing, all the water that comes out of the ice, all the melted ice, water that's melted from the ice, so it becomes part of the water that was there to begin with, and it's not considered nolad. That's what I would answer. That's how I would answer that question. In any case, I don't think I saw anyone stringent like that, saying that that it would be a problem if there's a lot of ice and less water, and you see the difference in the end. I don't think I've seen such an opinion, but it's worth checking. I'll check it for next time to see if anyone discusses that. Anyhow, back to our nafkamina between Rashi and the Rambam. So we said if we just place ice into existing water, no problem according to no one. Because according to Shulchan Aruch, you're not doing the action of crushing, it's just melting on its own. So we said that's allowed. According to the Ramah, we said that we mustn't allow it to melt on its own because it's nolad. But if it's within water that's already in the cup, so it's no longer nolad, so it's allowed. So according to all poskim, you're allowed to just place ice cubes into your cup of water. That's no problem. But are we allowed to crush ice with our hands, crush it, or with some utensil? We're crushing the ice into existing water. That would be an argument between the Rambam and that would be an afkamina. The difference between the Rambam and the Baal Truma or Rashi. I would say also Rashi be in the same category as Baal Truma between Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. According to the Shulchan Aruch, you mustn't do so. Because crushing itself is similar enough to mashkin shezavu, to the fact that juice comes out of a fruit. And it's similar enough to squeezing fruit. And if you squeeze a fruit into water, into liquid, you're definitely transgressing Shabbat. You're violating Shabbat. You can only squeeze into food, into solid. You cannot squeeze into liquid. So same as you can't squeeze a fruit into a liquid, you can't crush ice into a liquid. So according to Shulchan Aruch, that would not be allowed. According to the Ramah, it would be allowed because he holds that it's not like the Rambam basing. He bases the fact that you mustn't melt ice, not because of mashkin shezavu and all the issue of squeezing. Rather, it's the issue of nolad. And what does it matter if you're crushing it with your hands or you're just placing it into the water? The moment the water itself that comes out is not visible because it falls into an existing cup of water, then it's not nolad. And if it's not nolad, you could do it. And you're allowed to do it. So if we summarize the halachos now, according to the Shulchan Aruch, on one hand, you can't let ice melt. Sorry, you're allowed to let ice melt in an empty cup of water, empty cup even, no water. You're allowed to let it melt because you're not squeezing it. On the other hand, you mustn't squeeze it even into water, into existing water, because it's all based on the Rambam's opinion that it has to do with squeezing. You may go and squeeze fruits if we use this ice and get the water out of it. On the other hand, according to the Ramah, it's the exact opposite. You mustn't melt ice into an empty cup because the problem is nolad. And by doing so, you're creating water and we see it's obvious that the water was created. That's a problem. Whereas you're allowed to place ice into water or even to crush ice into water, because if it's done into water, into existing water, then there's no nolad because it's not visible enough as something new that came to the world.
Rabbi, do any of the Achronim mention, I mean, I'm not a chemist or a scientist, but I'm just assuming that ice cubes and water, they have the same chemical molecular makeup. So how can there be nolad if it's the same molecular makeup?
Scientifically, you may be right. I'm sure you're right. It's the same molecular, but the structure of it, I guess, is a little different. Makes it a solid instead of liquid.
Well, Rabbi?
Yes.
So I am a chemist.
Okay. Yeah.
There's a big difference between the structure of water and the structure of ice.
Oh, yeah?
Big. Yeah, they're not similar at all.
Oh, wow. Like what?
That's a chiddush for me. Thank you, Shakorach.
Yeah, I didn't know either. Can you explain the difference for laymen like us?
Ice, when water freezes,
yes,
there's a rigidity to it. There's a structure. There's a crystalline structure where
H2O.
The molecules move around freely. There's no rigidity to it. It's fluid. We see it as one's ice, one's solid, and one's a liquid. So the molecular structure of solids, liquids, and gases are very different. And it has to do with the freedom of movement of the molecules. In ice, there's very little freedom of movement of an H2O molecule. In water, there's fluidity. It can move. There's all kinds of questions about exactly what's the nature of the fluidity of the structure of water. There's many different theories. Nobody really knows the structure of water, but we know the structure of water is not like the structure of ice. And we know the structure of a gas is totally unlike the structure of a liquid or a solid. There's a big difference. Whether or not it's nolad or not, if you're linking nolad to the existence of a pre-existing structural entity, then it is nolad. If you're talking about one is H2O and the other one is also H2O, and it's not a structural difference, it's just a compositional difference, so then there is no nolad. That's the same. Compositionally, it's the same. Structurally, it's different. So if you want to link it to structure, saying that there is nolad, then we need to find another example where structure becomes relevant outside water.
Okay, very good. Understood. Thank you. Thank you. But I would say that halachically, someone wanted to say something?
I was just going to say the difference between the Rambam and what the Ramah was saying. It is maybe related to the question he's just talking about, because it's the transformation. Is the transformation of that structural difference observable or not? Right?
Exactly.
So Rambam,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
so
what it's, right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Exactly. Because halacha doesn't care so much chemically what's going on within the molecules or within the structure. Halacha doesn't care for all that. Halachically, we care for what we see, what we observe. And if we can see the difference, and not only is it a difference of structure, it's a difference of use. We use water differently than ice. Ice, most of us don't eat ice as is. Rather, we use it for cooling off all kinds of other things. To cool down all kinds of things, we use ice. Whereas water, we're drinking water. So that's enough. That's enough of a criteria to define nolad. It's switched from one situation to another, transformed from a solid to a liquid, and the use of them is different. That's very important. Very important. The fact, not only do they transform structure, but the use becomes a totally new use of the same artifact. That's nolad.
How about ice cream?
Ice cream would be the same problem.
I like to have ice cream in my coffee. Could I put a scoop of ice cream into coffee?
Yes, because that is into existing liquid. So even though it melts and becomes a liquid, it changes structure, but it's into a liquid. And we said melting ice into a liquid, and as long as you're not crushing it with your hand, rather just placing the scoop of ice cream into it, it melts on its own. So it's no problem for the Shulchan Aruch nor for the Ramah. Both will allow it. Even though I'm thinking out loud with you, maybe even melting ice cream on a plate or in a bowl without any existing liquid, maybe even that would be allowed. Because the difference in structure, the fact that it's changing its structure from a more solid, creamy type texture to a liquid one, that doesn't change the type of benefit you gain from the ice cream. In both cases, you're going to eat ice cream. In both cases, ice cream isn't meant to cool off something else. It's meant to be eaten as is. So what's the difference if you eat a solid ice cream or if you eat a liquid ice cream? It becomes sort of like a drink. There's not much of a difference. They're both being consumed. They both have the same taste. It's just the form is different. I would think that would be allowed, definitely into coffee, no question whatsoever, no problem at all. But I would, of course, make sure you have even a kli shlishi, I would say, for coffee, kli shlishi. Because Kli Sheni may cook the ice cream if it's boiling hot, and you put the ice cream into it, it may cook it. So Kli Shlishi, meaning you put the hot water into an empty cup, and the empty cup you pour it into your coffee mug, and there you make your coffee. That's the third cup from the urn. The second cup from the urn. The urn is the first Kli, an empty cup, and from the empty cup into your coffee mug. Then you make your coffee in that, and then you can definitely put the ice cream into that, no problem. But I'm saying that even if you melt the ice cream into an empty plate or empty bowl, even that should be okay, because they're both of the same use. You use them the same way. You're eating ice cream. What does it matter if it's melted or not? It's similar to some question I had a few years ago, and I asked Rabbi Fir Malka this question, and he said it's allowed. It's when you're using the liquid soap that turns into foam. When you press the button to get at the liquid soap, it transforms into foamy type soap. We have that in our shul in the Orlari. We have that. It's more like a fancy way of getting the liquid soap. So that is allowed on Shabbat. You're allowed to use that on Shabbat. How come? It's still transforming from a liquid to a semi-solid or more thick texture than it is as liquid soap. The answer is, or Firmaka explained, that mikara sabon, the hashta sabon. In both ways, it's a soap. We're not changing the essence of it by it formulating into a foam from a liquid. The change of form to becoming a foam is not a real difference. It doesn't create a major difference in the way we use the soap. We're still using it the same way. It's not.
It's interesting that going from transforming from freezing to liquid is fundamentally different halachically than going from liquid to steam. In other words, the boiling point is built into the melachot, whereas the freezing point is really not built into the halachot. Ofeh, afiyah, bishul.
Right.
Bishul is going from like liquids to gas, right? And that's a melacha d'oraita. But going from freezing to liquid is derabanan.
No, I understand where you're going to, but I don't think the melacha d'oraita of bishul is the fact that you're transforming the liquid into a gas. That's not the idea. The idea of bishul is the fact that the liquid itself gets cooked. The molecules of the water from being cold water to being boiling hot water, or a raw piece of chicken that you cook and make it edible, the chicken itself or the water itself, and it's now boiling hot, is considered cooked. That's the cooking process. The fact that some of the water evaporates into a gas and disappears, that's not the malacha. The malacha is not the transformation of a liquid into a gas. That's not the malacha's bishul. The malacha is what happens to the existing water that changes from cold water to boiling water. That's bishul. Or a raw piece of chicken that gets cooked, or a raw potato that you cook and make it edible on Shabbat, that's bishul. The transformation of a liquid into a gas is definitely not nolad, because it disappears, it evaporates into the air. You see nothing created there. There's nothing you can see. That's even David Levine's question from before of creating a larger volume of liquid by melting ice into water. That doesn't exist by evaporating, by the fact that water gets evaporated and becomes a gas. That has no visible
the other way
sense.
Thank you.
Put into gas, there's nothing visible there, so it's not nolad. Okay. So now we understood the to discuss the reasoning behind crushing ice, the two ways of understanding it, and the nafkaminot in both directions of this question of what malacha does that involve, a rabbinic decree, does that involve to crush ice and into water or melt it into water, or melt it into an empty utensil? All these questions are dependent on the Shulchan Aruch versus Ramah explaining this halacha of not being able to crush ice on Shabbat.
Rabbi, I just want to make sure for myself and the entire class, I'm not looking for any kind of chumrah, but if it's basic halacha, soda was not in the refrigerator. We're having soda on Shabbos. I bring a bowl of ice for my guests because no one likes to drink warm soda. When that ice bowl, the Suda lasts an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. At the end of the Suda, before we bench, that bowl is now whatever is left is water. The Rav is saying that it'd be forbidden for me to drink that water, and it's forbidden me, and it's also for me to even move it because it's muksa. Is that the Rav is teaching us?
True.
I've never heard that in my life. But it maybe I've never heard it, but maybe this is what for Ashkenazim you're saying. Maybe David, you'd be over Issa D'Oraisa for drinking that water, or Issa D'Rabbanan.
No, D'Oraisa for sure not. D'Oraisa for sure not.
And you can't even move it because it's muksa.
Okay, so for drinking, you're right. It's not allowed. It's not allowed unless we're talking about a small amount of water versus a lot of ice. If there's still a lot of ice left in the bucket or in the bowl, and there's a little bit of water. From muktzah point of view, no problem whatsoever because you're moving the bucket, holding due to the fact that it has ice in it. So it's like basis devar hasu mutar. It's as if it's a muktzah object and a non-muktzah object on the same plate.
No, but I'm talking about, Rabbi, at the end of the Suda. I'm talking not the beginning of the Suda. At the end of the Suda when it's 100% water.
Now if it's 100% water. Okay, so I'm going to the 100% water now. If it's 100% water, then definitely you cannot drink that water. You're right, that's no lot. That's exactly the case. When you've melted it into an empty plate, you've melted it into an empty plate, so it's no lot. You cannot drink that water, you have to throw it in the sink. But you are allowed to remove the bowl or bucket that has the ice in it, that has the melted ice, and now no longer it's only water, you're allowed to move it. How come? Because you're not touching the water, you're holding on to the plate or bucket that the water is in it. Now, although we hold that if there's muktzeh, only muktzeh object on a plate or tray or whatever surface you're moving, then it becomes basis l'davar asur. It's a basis, it contains a non-permissible object, so the surface itself becomes muktzeh, right? That's the concept of basis devar asur. But that's only true if it became a basis bein hashmashot of the beginning of Shabbat. Only then, if there's a muktzeh object, only a muktzeh object on a surface, that surface becomes muktzeh as well. Unless you forgot it there, we won't go into all the details of basis devar asur. If you just forgot it there, then it does not become a basis. Only if you intentionally left it there before Shabbat and all through Bein HaShmashot, the beginning of Shabbat, the first 20 minutes after Shkia, till Tzeis, that's Bein HaShmashot. Those first 20 minutes of Shabbat, the muktzah object was laying on that surface purposely, on purpose, then it becomes a basis and you mustn't move that whole structure. But if something becomes muktzeh during Shabbat, or if a muktzeh object is placed onto a surface during Shabbat, it does not become basis devar asur. You're allowed to remove it, just you're not allowed to touch the water itself. You can only hold on to the plate, bowl, or bucket and move it along to wherever you'd like to and throw it in the sink.
Isn't there an issue of milacha she'ena mitkavenet here about that ice? The ice was meant to be on the table to be used as ice. It just stayed there long enough and it melted, but that was not the kavanah at all.
That here in this case, it doesn't matter. That being the intent to melt it to become water, all water, that would be that would answer the question, how come it's bichlal allowed? Why is it allowed to bring out ice in a bucket or on a plate or in a bowl on Shabbat, knowing that it will become then nolad? Why isn't that a problem of causing the ice to melt on an empty surface, an empty utensil? Your answer is great for that. It's the Beshalach kaven. You don't mean for it to melt. That's not your purpose at all. The purpose is for it to remain ice and uses ice and not to melt it to water. In that case, at that point, you're right. That's when we say it's the Beshalach kaven, and your intent is not to make water out of it. But in our case, after it became water, it doesn't matter how it became water. Now it's the form. Realistically, that's the form it's in. It's water. Who cares how it became water? It's now muktzeh. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of nolad, which is definitely not intentional, and yet it's nolad. And by the way, this example which I'll give now also answers David Levine's previous question of the fact that the water has the same molecular consistency as ice. But yet we said it doesn't matter because Allah doesn't care for the chemical component. It cares for the external looks of it. How does it look? How does it seem to you? That's what creates nolad. Now I'll give you an example which definitely proves that that's nolad. The example is Chazal tell us that if a fruit falls from a tree on Shabbat down to the earth, it's nolad. You cannot touch that fruit. Not only can you not eat it on Shabbat, you can't even move it. It's muktzeh. Why is that? Nolad. Why is that nolad? The exact same fruit was on the tree in the beginning of Shabbat, and it just fell from the tree down to earth. Here, even David Weinstein won't be able to explain to us any molecular or structure difference between a fruit that's hanging on the tree and the same fruit that fell off the tree and fell down to the ground. It's the exact same, chemically, right?
It's dead, but it's dead now.
Okay, dead now, but it's still alive. Before it starts rotting, it's still the same exact fruit. It just doesn't get nurtured from the tree. That's true, but it's the exact same fruit, and yet it's nolad. How come? Because when it was on the tree, you couldn't benefit from it because you can't pick from the tree. It's a deraita malacha of kotzer. And now that it fell off the tree, it became edible. So to become edible is nolad. It switched from impossible to eat to a possibility to eat. That itself is nolad. It became a fruit. Until now, it was part of a tree. It's not even considered exactly a fruit because it's a part of a tree which you can't touch. You can't even lean on a tree, let alone pick from a tree. So when it falls off the tree, it became a fruit, became a food. That's nolad. It was born into a food now that you can eat and consume without any melacha. So that itself is a problem with nolad. That's how it's explained in Chazal.
So you could be in the same situation with any of the apples, especially if one fell down and gets mixed up with the others. You don't know which fell in Shabbat, which didn't fall in Shabbat, so you don't touch any apple.
That's a good question. If you know some apples fell beforehand, you didn't collect them from the ground before Shabbat, and some fell during. You don't know which is what. In general, we would use the concept of bitul berov. It's called yavesh beyavesh, meaning it's two solids, two dry foods that get nullified within the majority. If the majority of apples were ones that fell before Shabbat, so the few that fell during Shabbat get nullified, they're mixed in with the ones that fell before Shabbat, and they're all kosher to eat. Except besides one. In the Rashba holds that even when we have bitul berov, even when you have something that's nullified within the majority and becomes permitted, the whole thing becomes permissible, the Rashba still holds that you must leave one out because you're showing that this may be the one that's not allowed to eat, so you're putting it aside. It's not real. It's just
it's a thought that counts.
Right, exactly.
Bitul Barav, okay, fine.
So Bitul Barav could work here, unless they're very scattered one from the other. They're not close in the same bunch. They don't get nullified. They have to be in the same.
Okay.
Also, it has to be that you know that the majority fell off the tree before Shabbat. If you're not even sure about that, then you can't use them on Shabbat, right? Then you can't pick them up, because it may be that the majority fell during Shabbat from the tree, fell off the tree, and then you can't use them.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. So that's for nolad of it falling off the tree on Shabbat. So we see that the fact is that even if it's the exact same apple, but it gets a different use to it. Until now, it wasn't usable. It wasn't feasible to eat it, and now it becomes usable. You can eat it and enjoy it. That's nolad. So I was proving from this that the fact that you weren't intending for it to become nolad doesn't matter. Here, there was no intention whatsoever. It just fell off the tree without even you knowing. You didn't do anything to create the nolad. But it just happened, so it becomes nolad. Even though it just happened on its own, it becomes nolad. Because nolad is the fact that it's so, and not the action that led to it to become so. It's the fact that it's so. That's realistically what happened. That's what we care about nolad. So back to ice that David Levine spoke about. If we're out putting a bucket with ice or a bowl of ice on the table for Shabbos meal, and after 2 hours that all melts totally into water, the water is non-consumable on Shabbat. You mustn't drink it on Shabbat because of nolad. But the plate or the bucket does not become muktzeh because it happened during Shabbat. And since it happens during Shabbat, does not form a basis of davar asur, and doesn't make the surface that is holding the muktzeh object, doesn't make it muktzeh on its own.
Acharon Chaviv. A goy picks an orange on this tree on Shabbos. He peels the orange for himself. He goes, wow, this is delicious. He says, David, you want a piece? For me,
it's an orange?
A goy, a non-Jew.
Yeah.
Now I didn't ask him to do anything. He's getting the pleasure for it. But what the Rav is saying, I would be asked to eat that orange because of nolad, even though in a regular circumstance, I'd be able to eat that orange. Or I'd still be able to eat that orange. I didn't ask him to eat it. I didn't ask him to pick it or anything. And he did it for himself. He ate half the orange. He's offering me a piece.
It doesn't matter. If in the case that it fell off the tree on its own fell off, just stop because it's ripe and ready to fall and it fell down. Even then, it's nolad. Definitely when a goy picks it from a tree, it's nolad because there's been an action done on it to make edible.
It doesn't matter if it's molid or nolad.
Right. Even if someone made it possible, it's still nolad. Right. Whether it's molid or nolad, it's the exact same thing. It's for you, it's muktzeh because it's as if it fell off the tree. The guy is no better than it falling off the tree. Even then, you mustn't consume it. Right. That's a whole other issue. Of course, we can't tell a non-Jew to do it for us, but you're saying even if he picked it for himself, which is totally fine. Usually, when a guy does a malacha for himself, you're allowed to benefit from it.
That's why I asked.
Right. If he turns on a light on Shabbat for himself to read, you can easily benefit from it totally, no restrictions whatsoever. Because he did it for himself, he didn't do it for you. But here in this case, the orange that he picked off the tree becomes muktzeh for you to use, to consume, not because it did an action, but because as if it fell off the tree on Shabbat. It became edible on Shabbat, that's nolad.
So no nafkamina if he picked it, or if it was even on the ground, he picked it from the ground. There's no nafkamina.
Right, because you can't handle any of it. Maybe if he puts it into your mouth, like you open your mouth and the guy puts it in, you're not touching it. But even that's not okay to do, because muktzeh, one cannot move muktzeh. That's called tiltul. And there's a Rashba that says also you can't use a muktzeh object even if you're not moving it. It's not true all the time, meaning if you want to touch, you're allowed to touch a muktzeh object if you know it's not going to move. If you're not going to move it, you just touch it, you're allowed. But you can't use the muktzeh object even if you're not moving it. So you can't chew the piece of orange that you placed into your mouth. You can't chew it and swallow it because you're using muktzeh. So even that you can't have him do, like place it into your mouth. Maybe if it shoves it down your throat and you're not chewing or swallowing anything, that's okay. But that would never happen. So yeah, you can't benefit from that orange at all. Okay. Now let's be, we're actually over time. Actually, we did some points of this chapter anyhow, just by this whole long introduction. We did most of we did a few points of this chapter anyhow. Let's do the first discussion in the chapter here. Let's do this very quickly and we'll finish at this. What about the other way around? This we didn't discuss yet. How about making ice cubes on Shabbat? We spoke all the time about melting ice cubes and making it a liquid, a fluid. Can you make ice cubes on Shabbat from a liquid? You take water, place it into those cubicles, plastic cubicles or trays that make ice. Can you pour water into them and place it into the freezer, wait 2-3 hours, and you've got ice to use for Sudash Lishit, let's say. Can you make ice on Shabbat? So, according to the Sfardim, no problem. Why? Because we said, anytime we're not doing the action of crushing the ice, rather just letting it melt, they don't hold of Nolad. They only hold of Mashkin Shezavu of the Rambam, that says that it's the idea that you may go and crush and squeeze a grape if you crush ice. That's their understanding of why mustn't one crush ice. So by allowing it to melt, there's no problem at all, we said. According to the Sfardim, they're allowed to let the ice melt even in an empty cup because it's not an issue of Nola. So according to them, they're also allowed to let it formulate and freeze into ice. You're not doing an action to create something. You're just letting it on its own become ice, as letting it on its own become water. So in both directions, the Sfardim have no problem to do on Shabbat. Ashkenazim seemingly would have a problem because same as they're not allowed to let the ice melt into an empty container on Shabbat because that's nolad. There was no water, now it becomes water. Same should be the other way around. They should not be allowed to freeze water and make it into ice because nolad. They've created ice from water. And it's definitely a different form of usage from water to ice. Like we said, from ice to water. It's a different use totally. The water is for drinking. The ice is for cooling things off. So seemingly, it would not be allowed. And actually, in Rav Phil Malka's book, he really says so, that Ashkenazim should be machmir, not to make ice on Shabbat, same as they're not allowed to melt ice into water in an empty container on Shabbat. He only says, in Kom Tzorach Gadol, like a very strong heat wave, that you really need ice to cool off your drinks, your soda, your water, you're really desperate for it, then you can be mekel because nolad, in Kom Tzorach Gadol is allowed. Nolad in general, Shin Yud Chet Seif Tet Zayin, we allow nolad in Kom Tzorach Gadol. But the Rav Phil Malka missed a point here that Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach came up with, and it's written in the Shmira Shabbos Kilchasa, last week, I think I told you, did I speak to you about this? Or I remember if I spoke to you about the 2 points I spoke to Phil Malka over the radio show that he has every Thursday evening 10 days ago. Not this.
Yeah, you shared that with us.
I shared with you. Okay, right. So the 2 points that he missed out in his books and not quoting Shlomo Zalman on 2 different issues. So here's the third one now. I'm finding another one that he missed out. Shlomo Zalman in Shiva Shabbos Kilchasa has a long footnote allowing even Ashkenazim to create ice from water. You're allowed to freeze water and make it into ice. How come he allows that? Why is that nolad? It says of Shlomo Zalman the following. It's a brilliant idea he came up with, as usual, just using his head and making sense out of halacha. He says the following. In general, in the world, when you ask people all around the world, what is more beneficial to you in general in life, water or ice? What would be the answer? Water, of course. Everyone uses water much more than they use ice. Water, you just drink and drink and drink every day. And ice, you barely use. Once in a while, you need to use ice to cool off some drinks or some foods. You want to use ice to cool foods also. But it's barely used. It says of Shlomo Zalman, nolad is only a case where you say Mazel Tov, a new baby was born. How great. There's something new that's so beneficial, so thrilling to me. That's nolad. So turning ice into water, that's happy times. Here, now we have water to drink. Great, that's what we normally want, much more than ice. But turning water into ice, says of Shlomo Zalman, that's not nolad, that's killing it. Although in this specific case situation, you need the ice, otherwise you wouldn't be freezing water and making it into ice. You need the ice for this specific moment to call for Sudash Lishit, to cool off your soda or water. Okay, so you're making ice. In this case, you're benefiting more from the ice than from the water. But in general, the world needs water much more than it needs ice. So in general, you've ruined the water. By creating ice, you've ruined the water. You haven't made something greater and better. So to ruin something is not nolad. Even though your benefit right now, you're benefiting more. You want to benefit from the ice more so than the water. That's not called nolad. Therefore, even Ashkenazim can make even without tzorach gadol, even if it's not extremely hot and you have to have ice. Even normally, you just want a little bit cooler soda or water, you can make ice on Shabbat. So Zalman said no problem. It's not an issue of nolad. And definitely, according to the Sfardim, you can do it easily because they don't even have the issue of nolad to begin with. Okay, so making ice is allowed no matter what. Melting water into ice. According to Sfardim, you're allowed if you're not crushing it. Only if you're crushing it, you're not allowed. Melting on itself, you're allowed. According to Ashkenazim, you can't even melt it alone. We're not even crushing it, just letting it to melt alone. You mustn't do that. If it's melting, if you put ice cubes into water, into existing liquid, all poskim, Ashkenazim and Sfardim all allow it because you're not crushing and it's not nolad because it's integrating and mixing into the existing water. And if you're crushing into existing water, the Sfardim would not allow that because after all you're crushing, so it's like squeezing an orange and you're allowed to, and you may go do that or a grape. And when you're Ashkenazim allow even crushing because they don't mind the issue of mashkin shezavu, they mind the issue of nolad, and here it's into water, into a liquid, so they're allowed even to crush it into. That's the summary of all that we did regarding ice and water. So we've done, I think, most of the chapter actually. This covers most of the cases in the chapter. Next week, we'll try to see just the missing points in this chapter, and then hopefully we'll be able to even finish the book totally next week. We'll have a siyum on the first volume of Elichot Shabbat. Okay. Shkoyach to all. Shavua tov.
Shavua tov.
Have a healthy week.
Thank you so much.
Shavua tov. Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Yes, I'm waiting.
I did. No. No, it's so hard to communicate. So hard to understand.
What's that?
Yes. No. So hard to communicate. So.
It's so hard to communicate. Yeah.
No. Wait. Wait. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Back.
David, you're muted. David.
No.
You're muted.
1 minute. So hard. No. So hard. Oh.
Ayal, put video.
Yeah.
Ayal, put video.
No, hard to no understand. No.
Put video.
Turn on
No,
video. Yeah.
no, wait. No video. So hard to communicate.
Yeah.
We know. Ayal, put video.
No,
Video.
1 minute. No. Video. 1 minute. How to explain? No video. Wait. No. Yes.
Oh.
Zoom. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, here you are.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Shabbat.
Yes.
Going to ice. Afterward, no crouching. After not going to not art crouching. So hard.
Ayal, you want to ask about making ice?
No, yes.
So making ice, we said
Are you allowed
Friday
to make
night.
ice?
Yes.
Yeah, you can't ask you Friday night. Can you make ice Friday night?
Yes.
Yes. You're allowed to, even for the following day. You're right. Even though
Yes.
it's Friday night, you don't need to use it for that meal. You can make it for overnight.
Yeah.
To use it the daytime. Yes.
Yeah.
It's not because it's for Shabbat itself.
Thank you. Information. Judy and me and Judy, me for Judy.
It's for Judy. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell her that it's allowed to make ice no matter when during Shabbat, for Shabbat itself, not for after Shabbat.
Yeah. Wait.
For after Shabbat. That's a chana.
Wait.
Guys, for Shabbat, that's okay.
Wait. Girl, you going home? No. Going home to wait. Girl. No. Open the door. Open the door. You going home?
Yes.
No, into the malls. One day ago.
Yeah.
You.
Shabbat.
Yeah, you go. And the door was locked? The door was locked.
No.
You're asking
going home.
Yes.
You one girl no inter.
Wait, you want to ask about Corona?
Yes.
His daughter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is she okay?
Rabbi.
You want to ask if his
I think
daughter's
he's asking
okay?
you. I think he's asking you, Rabbi.
That
Yeah.
was
Corona.
my daughter.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I mean for the rabbi.
Thank you. Yeah. She's okay. She's she tested positive, but she's feeling perfectly fine. She's totally fine. Thank you for asking.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay. Have a Shabbat, everyone.
Take care.
Rav Steinberg.
Yes.
Do you hear me, Rav Steinberg?
Yes, I hear you. Yes. I hear you.
Good connection. Rav Steinberg, do you hear me?
Yes.
So there's oh good. There's a American expression kids use when you do something really well. It says you crushed it. So in this year, I have to say, you crushed it. Shabbat.